Chapter 5 Smoke on the Water. The wind was soft, and the sun was fair. Small and colorful birds sing a gorgeous string of melodies, while a neighboring tree full of corvids bark and caw with a tune of their own, as if you had placed Beethoven and Lamb of God in the same concert hall. Swift attempts to compose a poem to encapsulate the moment, but can find little more than a gripping opening line and soon forgets the idea entirely. Scodenhold was once a humble little trading post positioned queerly just off the King's Road, which had become rougher and more challenging to navigate. A clouded spire of ash on the horizon grows. Yo, this must be that village that Ham guy was mentioning? Ben thought aloud, as they were coming about it. Their driving was quite abysmal. It was practically a miracle that shaman had abandoned his pursuit when it had come to it, and most fortunate that the road had not taken any sharp, unexpected turns. Navigating this sturdy old wagon was, for them, a farce, especially with negligible experience in even riding a horse. Trotting up the path, the wagon swayed this way and that before reaching a shabby, unmarked archway. Passing through the unguarded opening, a single street of aged and cracked cobble is seen. It shot straight across for about a half mile to an entryway mirroring this one. There didn't seem to be but scattered signs of life, and little was there to see beyond a handful of small wooden homes and businesses strewn about either side of the road. A sign swayed and creaked on the first as the wind picked up softly. On it was an illustration of an animal pelt. Too worn to tell what it was meant to be, a handful of patrons were waiting their turn outside, standing with the reins of their horses loosely in hand, and stacks of skin behind the cantles of their mounts. A few doors down, past a couple of residences, a man was chopping wood with heavy and precise strikes. Behind him, a hut bellows smoke from a tall iron chimney. Unpleasant was the smell, as smoldering animal fat, oil, and tar. The man set up another log, and his eyes met with Ben's. The pair rode on slowly, but his glare persisted until long they had passed. Swift, who had taken the reins some time ago, tried his best not to look a fool as he navigated their way around a parked trader caravan and some people that had been gathered about it. As they carried on, they could not help but notice an abundance of glares, the tone of which was nearly identical to the one they had met on that brutish log splitter. It was uncomfortably uncanny how they would stare at them, and then they would stare at the wagon, and then slowly back at the pair once more. Ben and Swift were drawing attention, as rotted meat and honey will draw flies. "Keep going," whispered Ben as he spotted the village's end coming to them. He nearly bust out his lighter, without a concern, but his skin flushed icy cold when he thought of what might happen to them. If these people were to see something like a butane lighter, they would probably be burned at the stake. He concealed the lighter under his sleeve, lit a cigarette, and took a deliciously stress-relieving drag. He was glad that Swift was willing to take over for a bit. He needed a moment to gather his wits. He hadn't a smoke since the morning of their arrival in this realm, and truthfully, neither one was more adept behind the wheel than the other. Almost in the clear now, but as they came towards the exit, a fat bearded man, sitting at a patio, shouted out to them.
"Driver!"
His voice rang loud and struck the eardrum with an uncomfortably gritted vibration. Swift kept his composure and stayed ahead, doing his best and pretending not to have heard the man.
Driver!
This time he stood up from his chair, drink in hand. He spilt a great deal of it onto his shirt as he slammed the liquid down his gullet, then approached the guardrail, separating street from eatery, and rested his bulbous gut on it.
This wagon is early.
He chuckled to them.
I have enough time to finish my first supper.
He was acting mighty queer. Swift paid the man no mind and once again continued without a hint of expression. They were so damn close to getting out of here.
Wait!
The bumpkin yelled, gathering a pristine leather bag and another of burlap that he tossed over his shoulders. After scattering a few coins on the table, he began to waddle over. Swift tries to speed up the wagon, but no matter which way he threw the reins, he couldn't figure it out for the life of him. He hoped desperately that he wasn't hurting the poor animals, but he wished also that they would just listen to him. The man stopped in front of the boys, and the horses came to an automatic and sudden halt.
For fuck's sakes, are you a fucking idiot?
Swift yelled as Ben and himself were nearly flung from the wagon.
I need a ride to Merrigan,
Claimed the portly fool, all business. Well, too fucking bad. No rides today, Ben snapped, while slamming a fist into his armrest. However, this didn't seem to work, as the man hadn't budged an inch and looked as though he had no intention of it until he got his way. Thankfully, Swift had a follow-up.
We're taking this wagon in for repairs. It's not safe to have passengers at this time.
That's strange.
The fat man rested one hand under his chin and the other scratched at an earlobe.
If it needs fixing, surely Ham would have sent you to me.
He gazed down the length of the wagon, hurriedly inspecting all that he could see.
To me, it seems there's no damage to the wheels or the body. I checked this wagon not 3 days ago. For Ham found himself in a ditch. A man likes his drink, you know. I found some minor damage on the underside, and a slightly fractured front axle, which I replaced with haste.
Ben and Swift were momentarily stunned as the man carried on.
In fact, I check this wagon on a weekly basis. I'm the master mechanic from Skull and Holes. I've been repairing this wagon for more years than I can count.
Which the boys suspected was not a very high number.
By the bats, even several of the Knights Lords demand my services. The day I met Ham, he vowed to take me wherever I needed, free of charge. I have a fear of riding, you see. It's a tragic and a long story.
Now dithering, as if he was getting emotional. He went on blithering until Swift made out the scrape of encroaching footsteps. People were approaching and apparently had been for some time, as they were coming to and had by now almost entirely surrounded the wagon. "What'd you do with my father?" said a lady in a blood-stained apron. She looked to be either a butcher or a serial killer. Her cleaver glared in the sunlight. Another, older woman was beside her, deep wrinkles and scars etched into her crabby face.
"To los wagon,"
said the log splitter with his big axe. He had an off-putting accent and was toting fast, a two-handed grip on the weapon.
"Wagon Creek!"
shouted yet another villager in the back who wore a frying pan as a hat. He had an ugly green vest and his eyes were narrow and misshapen.
"Murderers!"
The sound of weapons drawn overlay with the accusation. The pair had found themselves in a very bad spot indeed. "What do we do, Swift? We're about to get fucking gutted, dude. Let's get the fuck out of here. Go now!" shrieked Ben. Swift could only think of one thing, and he dreaded it. Snatching Ben's cigarette, he pushes the burning end into the back of the horse nearest to him. The beast roared and whinnied and kicked off hard, jarring the wagon so violently it felt like the frame was being twisted off. The other horse panicked and started as well. The wagon took off in a second snapping jerk. Several people were in the way and got fucking owned. The fat, bothersome, alleged repairman flies over top Ben and Swift, and on his way down careens his head on the side of the wagon with an oof. Another man was not so lucky as this. He was tackled by the stallion in its rage and fear. Losing his footing, he is brought under the cart in a most unfortunate way. In the cloud of chaos, there was nothing anyone could have done to stop it. The man's head was violently crushed beneath the wheel in the road in a most undignified ending. This destroyed one of the spokes, and the wagon became critically unstable. Swift cursed and yanked the reins hard to the right, regaining control by the skin of his teeth. He looked to Ben.
Watch out!
The man with the frying pan hat had him by the neck in an incomplete chokehold. Ben leaned forward with all his weight and came back, delivering a powerful headbutt that staggers him. It crushed the cartilage in the man's nose, which began pulsing blood. Reaching over his shoulder, Ben grabs the frying pan off of the man's head and brings it over top in a swing. Down with all his might it falls, cracking the man's skull and shattering his teeth. Frying pan hat falls limp. His grip fully loosened, the body topples, impacting forcefully with the side of the stone exitway, a final spurt of blood. The wagon blew past and the brothers were out of Scodenhold. Clouds of dust and a crimson mist burst from behind them. A flurry of infuriated shouts, screams, and stones come at their back as they made their explosive escape. Soon, but not soon enough, mind you, the town was a speck on the horizon, an eventual memory. On top of that, thankfully, it seemed they had not sent for anyone in pursuit. After a short rickety ride, they were at last noticeably safe. Which means it had come time to stop and unhitch the damaged wagon in the great grassy plains. The fields rolled on, yonderless, dotted by the occasional tree or shrub. Unshackling and tossing the leather straps from their mounts, careful to keep their eyes forward, sparing them from the sight of the gore that had undoubtedly painted the side of the wagon, Ben's gaze is finally able to fixate towards the east. There it sat, a great distance away, an immense castle, resting on a shelf but an enormous fault line formed by the shifting of the very continent itself thousands of years ago. Intimidating, to say the least. The sheer sight of it, even from these many miles off, struck anxiety as a bolt of lightning through the heart. Yet, strangely, did not bring about fear, but instead a persistent sense of prestige and honor, as well as basic human curiosity for its transcendental architecture. Being layered almost like a pyramid, each level of the structure could have been considered a castle in its own right, until it had come to the top levels, whose size was only fitting enough for something like an armory or large watchtower. On each of the four corners rose huge pillars of blackened stone, and on the top was the largest of them all. It pointed sharp and hard, clutching at the utmost clouds in the sky. "There it is, there it is!" Ben squeed. There was a moment for rummaging, and in his bag, Swift found a medical salve. He gently applied it to the horse's burn. The fact that he had to harm the animal in any capacity in order to save himself and Ben. Well, it didn't really sit right. He looked the mayor directly in the eye.
Sorry.
As they mounted and carried forth, the castle seemed to them to get closer, yet further away at the same time. For as it grew in size, so too did the realization in them that they still had some hours' journey ahead.
How fucking big is this place?
The soft clopping of hooves was the only banter for the next few miles. Both of them meant to speak, but whenever their mouths would open, silence would befall them, as the terror and shame of what they had done was sinking ever deeper and barbing their hearts. Like freezing cold, viscous black venom. The lands would roll one way and then the other, but would always level out and then stay that way for some time. 3 rivers they crossed that day. The second was filled with the chirping of frogs and insects, and on the third, Swift saw hundreds of tiny crystal fish swimming down its current. They appeared to propel themselves through the water by rather odd means, mechanically comparable to the twisting of a screw or the way in which a hummingbird stays afloat. Not long after, a flock of butterflies hovered over the pair, and were a little too close for Ben's liking. He found himself disgusted with the discovery of their 8 webbed wings and elongated antennae. Swift found them marvelous. A family of critters scurried across their path so quickly that it was impossible to identify any details, but Ben swore that they were a grounded bird like a quail, and Swift insisted that they were more like a miniature wild boars. As the city wall comes into view, it was now at last becoming clear the vast magnitude of this kingdom. For now, it was no longer possible to be concerned with anything other than its majesty. The outer wall was constructed of massive spiked wooden cabers that were fastened tightly together. This was done thrice, so that the wall stood 3 layers deep. It wrapped all the way around the kingdom in an oval. The walls went up in elevation, as too did the city, for Marar was constructed on a hill, and a great many things could be distinguished even from here, far outside its walls. The kingdom was broken into 3 sections, consisting of 2 cities and the castle as described previously. The first city, of dirt roads and wooden structures, surrounded 90-some% of the inner city in a crescent moon shape that narrowed off on either side as it came to the cliff face of the castle's precipice. This first city was referred to by the people as Miradim. This is where the bulk of businesses and residences are. If you live in Marar, regardless of your position in society, you will likely be spending a large part of your time during the day here, in Miradim. Taverns, food stands, art stands, shops for armor, clothing, weaponry, jewelry, bathhouses, stables, barns, barters, beggars, gamblers, gangsters, vagrants, vagabonds, prostitutes, pimps, pushers, and game players. Oh, and not to mention an abundance of friendly folk that can all be found here in Miradim, as well as few guard towers. These can be found no matter where you are in Marar, but they get particularly more dense as you travel uphill towards the inner city, Miradoth. As the name would suggest, and as you may have already guessed, these 2 cities are separated by very little other than a wall with a liberal amount of doors all along it. In fact, usually the only way to tell that you have crossed from one to the other is that the streets and buildings are of much different architecture that rely more heavily on stone and steel rather than materials such as wood and clay. Miradoth consists solely of towers and housing made strictly for guards, warriors, and nobility. At least, that is what they tell. But the people of Miradim suspect that more goes on up there than what they say, and then humor themselves with conspiracies of secret clubhouses where the rich and powerful gather together and get up to no good. After all, why shouldn't they? The boys now could finally get a better look at those jet black, sparkling towers, too. They were unusually square in shape, but came to a needle point at the tip. They didn't appear to be fitted with windows or doors or really anything at all. Nothing more than a few weird-looking art installations, they supposed. Ben brought his horse to a stop. He was veritably beginning to listen to him, which was a surprise. Wait, dude, spoke he. This isn't gonna work.
What? What do you mean? What isn't gonna work?
Asked Swift, halting his steed as well. You're riding into that big-ass kingdom? Saddleless horses? With the way we look and all? It's just gonna be a repeat of Scodenhold. We're gonna get straight up got. Swift ponders.
I suppose you got a point. What do you suggest?
Well, says Ben. First, we're gonna have to ditch these ponies. Before we get too close to the gates. I mean, I'd love to keep these homies, but they're not gonna help our case here. Then, I guess we're gonna need some way of, blending in. He paused to think as they found a spot off the beaten path to part with the horses. They unshackled them of all their weights and burdens and sent them off with a pat. The steeds wandered for a moment, looking around them in every direction. After a while of stammering, they both wandered off in a separate course with no sense of urgency. Oh! I know. Hear me out. We cover ourselves in mud. Let's be honest, these shirts, jackets, and jeans, they make us stand out like a stubbed thumb. And masking them might be enough to do the trick. Plus, hey, maybe we'll be filthy enough that the guards won't even want to deal with us, you know?
No.
Protests Swift.
I hear what you're saying, but I got a better idea. I'll tie you up and tell them you're a troublemaker that I put under citizen's arrest, and I'm bringing you to the jail.
That could work. Yeah, I mean, that could work. Or, what if we explain our weird appearance by telling them that we're here for a fashion show?
What about we show them our bags and tell them that we bought them here, and we want to get them returned before the shops close?
You think they would believe we're vendors of some kind? The discussing and debating went on like this for a while, until they decided it was time to choose an option. When they came to the east gate, it appeared they could not decide and had gone with all of them. Covered head to toe in mud, they began, Swift first.
Yo, this guy's my prisoner. Where's the nearest jail?
Then Ben. He's my husband. Where's the Hotel La Chante? We booked our honeymoon months ago?
You guys want to buy some snake oil, freshest in the land. It'll keep your wife happy if you know what I mean, huh?
Hey, you handsome fellas look like you could use a drink. I'll buy. It's on me.
I can do 3 for 2, 7 for 3. What you need?
Yeah, well, we heard there's a musical performance tonight in the big city. We're just simple country folk. We don't know much about this big city life, but figured we'd come and give it a gander and see what all the hubbubaloo is about.
Ben didn't know why, but this one had come out in a thick southern accent.
Hey, we found some horses frolicking around in the fields. Free horses for you guys, am I right?
Hey, how fast you guys bet that we can run past you into the other side of the city? You want to find out?
Hey, yo, check out that massive distraction behind you guys.
You want to hear a riddle? One of the guards raised a hand, and up they shot. The guards' heads pivot slowly, turning to face one another. Then, they nearly toppled over in laughter.
Oh, Lord said it's funny,
Spoke the one, lowering his hand.
kids are getting funnier and funnier these days. Now quit messing around, go and wash up and get home, you two. You know, children are not to be playing outside the walls at this hour. But don't worry, you made us laugh, so we won't be telling your parents. Now hurry along, you hubbagubs.
Oh, tell us, shan't. Honestly. They laughed one final time, as did Swift and Ben while walking past, but they were less than amused.
Kids? Goddamn children? What the fuck makes them think that? They weren't even any taller than us, and now we're all muddied for nothing.
Barked Ben, in a sort of hushed tone.
Yeah, whatever, man. At least we made it. Now let's find somewhere to clean ourselves off.
Swift's voice came calmly, showing up red dust as they entered into the bustling city. Soon they had come to a fountain, the size of an entire cul-de-sac. It acted as a kind of public swimming pool, as there were a great deal of people, not just men, but other races too. The most interesting of these being the Nomiri. Tiny little men with rosy cheeks, long pointed noses, and wooden shoes on their feet. They wore a variety of colored hats, along with an outfit to match. They ranged from pointed to round, tall to short, flat to bold, small to oversized, and some wore no hats at all, but they all had deep, glistening silver, golden, or amber hair. They spoke in a giggle and would say things like, "Hey there, young fella, you coming today, young fella?" They would come together, gathering here to socialize and relax in the cool, clear water after a long day's work. Boys were thrilled to see such a sight, especially after a day's journey with the hot sun pelting them. It reminded them of the YMCA swimming pools back on their home world, plus the sight of these strange characters and critters helped distract their minds. Although, it'd still be easy for you or I to pick them out of this crowd. Nobody seemed to be bothered or even care that they were here. In this way, the pair no longer found it pressing or necessary to blend in. The mud was already starting to dry. They set aside their belongings, and in they went. The water was cold but not bitter, and it was deep, for a fountain, that is. It ran about 3 feet, and closer to 4 towards its center, where there had been crafted a huge statue of a most beautiful queen. She wore a delicate gown and was wrapped in a scarf of silk that draped from her shoulders and rested on a bent knee. One hand was perpendicular to her chest, palm skyward. The other came over top her head, and they were both holding onto a vase, elaborately detailed with a pointed spout. Water gushed from it in great gulps. All was captured in immaculate detail through marble. After washing their faces and submerging their bodies, Ben goes for his smokes. As he shuffles the package open, he notices that he only has 3 left, and decides that part of his day tomorrow must be dedicated to finding this world's equivalent of tobacco. Swift chose to bum a drag, which was not typically something you'd see from him. They sat for a while and had a somewhat forced chat, recalling and discussing their favorite drum solos. Ben found his gaze falling upon a gaggle of beautiful women, deeply tanned with triangular noses, blushing blue eyes, sharply defined muscle tone, and glowing red hair, just like that little fox in the forest. They wore lavish jewelry, their swimwear pressed tight against their bodies, leaving little to the imagination. They were laughing warmly at a joke that only they could understand, for it was told in their native language. This was the first moment since their arrival that they had felt even remotely at ease. That is to say, until Swift noticed the dark brown clouded water that surrounded them.
Oh shit.
Said he.
We're making a fucking mess.
At once, they had both come to realize what washing their muddy bodies had done, and silently they decided to sneak out of there before they were to get in any more trouble. Walking away, soaking wet, the boys heard the voice of a guard.
Oh, by yonder's glory. What's happened here? Oh, Lord's honour. Alright, every eye of us asks you to leave for now. I'm sorry, everyone. The fountain of Kotaro Rodester's closed temporarily. But we clean it out. Somebody sullied the water. Again.
He was most unpleased, and apparently so were the locals being told to leave their hangout spot. Onlookers booed.
Oh, lords. It's gonna take days to get clean again. I'll pay for this.
Hearing that, Swift and Ben doubled their pace. The commotion died down once they had walked a few city blocks. Then it hit them, as it often and suddenly will when you find yourself as busy and out of your element as they. Since their camp in Horon, they'd not eaten much beyond some pieces of dried fruit and thin strips of cured meat, which had all but run out a mile or so west of Skodenhold, and they were now famished. Ben received the message in the form of a roar from his stomach, which he promptly relayed to Swift. Swift reciprocated, but it turned out he had some good news as well.
Well, you were checking out the pool bunnies, which, I mean, don't get it twisted. I absolutely was too. That tall girl? Anyway, I found what looked to be some currency at the bottom of the fountain and pocketed a few of the coins. Hopefully this will be enough to buy us something,
he said, while flashing a handful of silver. Whilst walking, they dried off fairly quickly, thanks in part to the sun. Even though it started to set, its warmth was undeniable. Swift tried to strike a conversation about speedrunning, but they found the mention of anything from home just left them feeling lonely and wanting, just as it had done back at the fountain. While strolling along, attempting to familiarize with the city, nearly the first thing they observed was a lad that had gone quite mad. Halfway down a shadowed alleyway, he was heard screaming for his life.
Yes! Yes! Oh, hell yeah, yes! Go to hell! Fire! Oh, Blapuda! Hell yeah! Oh, Blapuda the Jodies! Oh, Blapuda Wild Eyes!
Dude, is H-Box down there winning finals from loser's side? What the fuck is going on? Says Ben. For an undiscernible reason, the loony was carrying a water bottle filled to the brim with sweet corn that was swimming in a gelatinous solution.
Yes! Yeah! Go to hell! Yeah!
The man wouldn't stop. It was goddamn annoying, Swift thought. They quickened their pace, lest they must suffer this buffoonery for a moment longer.
What an annoying fucking prick.
Expressed Swift.
Have some common courtesy and keep your fucking crazy at home for fuck's sake. Absolute obnoxiousness.
The next oddity they happened by was a barber shop with an open door, where a customer could be heard calmly explaining that he was somewhat dissatisfied with his new cut. I don't know. I mean, the length is good, but the style's a bit off, and you didn't use any oil, so it's a little bit coarse. It's kind of rough and irritating. If you look at your shop floor, you can see how it's... The lady cutting his hair shrieked. The man sprung up out of the chair and flew out the door. In another direction, a man was desperately clawing at the earth with his bare hands, digging a hole to nowhere, his eyes wild with a fevered madness.
This is fucking Greece. What the fuck is going on around here?
Said Swift. Ben was unshaken. He'd experienced crazier at home. They walked down one street, and then another. A window was cracked open, and there could be heard someone practicing a string instrument on the other side. Next, as luck would have it, they soon came upon a quaint bakery. While approaching, a man is seen fumbling about at its door. Ben grabs his attention with a firm,
Yo!
"Good evening, gentlemen," spoke the stranger, while turning around to face them. "If you're here for me, closed for the night, I'm afraid. Just locked up."
Aw, dude, really? Me and my homie are starving. Could you please help us out? Just let us in for a minute. We have some money.
Swift held up the pocket change he had gathered. The baker looked it over. Some of the coins were eroded, bent, or otherwise rusted to the point of worthlessness. And what was not damaged didn't amount to very much at all. "Maybe enough for an apple," said the baker. They did look hungry. He had known that expression all too well.
You know what?
Then he pulled a bag from under his arm, and from it 2 large, heavily seated buns. He tossed one to Ben, and then one to Swift.
On the house. Don't even mention it, really.
He was quite insistent and impeccably polite. As far as they knew, it was the first time anyone had shown them any compassion or kindness in this land. They thanked him, quite profusely. He pulled one final bun out of the sack, emptying it, and took a hearty bite. All expressed their farewells. Small deeds did not go forgotten. Ben and Swift leaned on a nearby wall to enjoy their snack. It was good, if a little bland.
A little bit sweet. It'd be good with tea. The seeds are the best part for sure, eh, Benny?
Swift looked over and saw Ben was not well. He was sweating and pale white. It looked like he was about to faint. His hands, legs, and forehead were numb. He was having a panic attack.
Yo, dude, sit down, sit down.
"I don't want to sit down on this dirty-ass street," expressed Ben. In his mind, something uninvited, the sickening sound of that man's head being crunched under the wagon wheel, flashed across his thoughts. And it held fast. He couldn't think of anything besides the gruesomeness of that manslaughter, and they had been at fault. Ben never hurt a fly or started a fight in his life, and now someone was dead because of him and Swift. Not to mention the man he had smashed with the frying pan. He very well may have passed as well. It blurred his vision, and he vomited onto the pavement. A few faces turned in disgust, and Swift understood the issue, or at least part of it. Ben was completely overwhelmed. They needed to find somewhere safe and quiet where they could just breathe for a moment. Swift saw a tall, rounded guard tower with an open door, and suggests they check it out.
Fuck it, dude. Let's get away from all these fucking people. That place looks pretty quiet. We'll just chill out there and smoke some joints and sing some tunes. That always cheers you up. Come on, dude. You'll be okay, I promise.
Ben found new strength in these words. In fact, if Swift had not been there to rally and ground him, he almost certainly would have passed out right on the side of the street. The sweat dried from him like squeegee dragged over wet tile. Let's fucking do it. The tower was old, musty, and dusty, although it had been taller than the others. It seemed to be retired as a guard's post, and now simply serves as part of the skyline. Entering inside, they noticed the door wasn't open. It was simply not present at all. But it was difficult to tell if it had been removed or was originally designed this way. Up and up and up, the spiral box staircase they climb. A few things of note are passed. Some empty painting frames, an occasional window, or torch stand was about all. They decided to stop halfway up for a quick rest, since it was a climb of about 500 steps, and Ben was incredibly out of shape. Swift shuffles through his pack and pulls out the baggie of marijuana.
14 joints left, bud. What do you say once we get to the top, we smoke 10 of them? Let's just get fucking blitzkrieged.
Sounds good. About 50 stairs from the roof of the building, they find a suitable candidate for a chill sesh. A wide, round room with a short ceiling, it had a single narrow window which told the tale of why this tower had been retired. It was a window meant for a sharpshooter to have maximum visibility and range of motion, while also prioritizing adequate shielding in case someone had been firing back. It obviously used to sit on the edge of the city wall to help keep anything undesirable at bay, but since the city had expanded time and time again, this tower was pushed inward and was no longer effective for its original purpose. It was built artistically and was considered by many to be a staple of the town's history.
Well, homie, I think this is the best we're gonna get. I figure if we smoke fast and hard enough, we can hotbox this bitch. You with me?
Ben nodded. Magic number it?
Oh, you know it, buddy.
Oh, yeah, he said, as he lit all three. Swift egged him on.
Do the thing, do the thing.
Ugh, sighed Ben. His tongue stretched from his mouth and formed a pocket to cradle the joints. Then he opened his mouth wide, flipped them upside down inside of it, and closed his jaw. His cheeks bulged as smoke poured from his nose. Then he threw both his hands together, joined at the thumb, forming a W. Now he opened his mouth again and flipped them back over to perch on his lip, all without them burning the roof of his mouth or putting out the cherry. Or at least, this was the idea of the trick. But he messed it up, and he burnt his lip and the upper roof of his mouth like a damn fool. Choked Ben. Oh, I'm out of practice, dude. I'm gonna retire that gimmick.
Aw, man. All good, man. I get it. Well, time you came up with a new party trick, I guess.
Said Swift, looking down at his hands as he lit 3 more joints and puffed on them hard. That's more like it, Ben thought, being very much content with the silence and fluttering smoke that was now layering densely, thickening to envelop the room in white. Swift had promised a song, and Ben was in quite the mood to sing, as he had a talent for doing, even with lungs filled with smoke. And he was very inspired by this setting. Again, I would like to request that you pause this chapter and go listen to this song. They sang The Watchman's Out by Gordon Lightfoot. Ben had to remind Swift what most of the lyrics were. Just as soon as they had finished singing the last line, the little light that had peered through the window dimmed, as if a tremendous cloud were passing overhead. The noise of the city they tried to escape became ever the worse. A stone-splitting crack, followed by more banging and shouting. A great burst of wind rumbles the tower, making a marvelous sound as it whistles through the windows and barren chambers. Then, another great crash, this time accompanied by screams of horror and the bellowing cries of horns tuned to one another in a minor chord. The air felt full of static buildup and turbulence. Then, yet another crash. But this one sounded more of thunder than of toppling wood. That's when they heard a terrifying and booming voice, loud and horrible enough to turn bedrock to rubble and lay entire forests to waste. It was speaking in an ancient and foul language. This last word exploded high into the sky and sent a quiver deep into the ground below. But no voice could carry that far and that loud without a microphone and amplifier. They thought. They hoped. The disturbing disarray was enough to warrant a response from Ben. "What the shit tit is going on down there? Can't those fuckos shut the fuck up? Don't they know we're trying to fucking smoke and chill here?"
I don't know, who fucking cares?
Said Swift, lighting the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th joint just as he had promised, and just as the first set were reaching their filter. For a quick reference of how smoked out this room was, they were seated less than a foot apart and could no longer see each other's faces. Only a few puffs in, the tower began to shake forcefully.
Jesus, fuck!
If they had not already been seated, they would have fallen over from the impact. The shaking let up, and then they heard a rumble coming from the window, like that of a big block V8 motor from an old muscle car, and the scratching sound of granite scraping against stone. They now knew they were not just hearing things. There was something just outside that window, hanging onto the tower. Whatever it was enormous, and it was alive. Their bodies stiffened in anticipation, but they were really more confused than they were afraid. Ben wanted to get up and check it out, but the thought died in him when he felt the room quickly become very warm as a gust of hot wind shoots from a focused point in the window. The smoke spun and swirled with this. Ben wanted to get up and check it out, but the thought died in him when he felt the room quickly become very warm as a gust of hot wind shoots from a focused point in the lattice. Smoke spun and swirled with this, and then, just as quickly, began to dissipate. It was being siphoned from every corner of the room and vacuumed out instantly, like an airlock being broken on a ship traveling through deep space. What they now saw in the clear air of the room was unlike anything they had ever seen before, and it terrified them more than they dared to imagine the limits of fear being capable. A long, sharp, scaled, bright green snout was peeking through the cold stone of the window and was pointed directly at them. It had ridges on the top and bottom, sort of like the underside of an alligator. 2 fangs rose out from the bottom lip. They were yellow, jagged, and gnarled, horribly overgrown, so that they stabbed through the upper mouth just behind its nostrils, which were large enough to fit your fist inside, but if you had, they'd have been singed off. It had some extremely thick golden hair underneath its chin, which matched a flowing mane. His eyes were deep and infinite, and burned with a hellish shade of red, redder than blood. It was, as far as they could see it, a dragon. Fiercer than any creature in the land, or across all the lands of all the continents of this world. But quickly they came to realize that something was amiss. In spite of their shock, the creature wasn't moving, nor breathing. As if somebody had suddenly clicked off the V8. It had happened so rapidly that their minds took a moment to catch up and fill them in. This dude just smoked over an ounce of the best BC ganj, which happens to be the strongest weed on the planet Earth in a single inhale, Swift thought.
Yo, Shenron just got fucking baked, dude.
Said out loud. This proved to be too much, even for a mythical and terrifying creature. He had been used to exhaling fire, not inhaling it. Its eyes twitched and shut, its nostrils closed, and its winged ears folded back oddly. The grip faltered and ultimately gave out as its snout drew back from the window and the beast was cast down from the tower. Swift bolted to the window and Ben followed, both craning their heads out of it quite cartoonishly. They didn't want to miss this. The great green creature fell ungracefully, with his fat bronze chest pointed to the sky. Colors dazzling from the scales, achieved through ultraviolet lights produced by the sunset, which bounced off of the scales and made them appear as a collage of radiant gems shingled along its entire body. The arms and legs spread out. Each limb had a set of 5 fearsome obsidian-hooked claws. Its neck craned backwards, revealing gills as it flailed about ungracefully. Its hair flapped in the wind as it picked up speed, falling further and further down. Simply crashing to the ground and snapping its neck would have been too merciful an end for a beast without any. And so, its body fell onto the direct center of the fountain. Its spine was snapped, its organs were torn, and its belly pierced with the statue of Kotro Rodistar. She stood victorious, noble, and strong as ever, but now, instead of resting peacefully atop a pedestal, she rose menacingly from the stomach of a felled dragon. Drenched head to toe in a syrupy, sharp violet blood that now spilled from her vase and turned all the water a deep purple, it overflowed out onto the streets below, channeling into the cracks and grooves like a web. The dragon was dead.